In 2007, Disney released Pirates of the Caribbean Online, and it had pretty much anything a Pirates of the Caribbean fan would want. You can create your own character, sail along the high seas with your crew of scallywags, and go on high sea adventures, all while interacting with some of your favorite characters from the series. This was my first ever MMORPG. I remember being about 8 years old when my brothers all shared an account and we had one pirate that we were running around with. And then I remember how excited I was when I turned 9 years old and could have my very own email address, which allowed me to be able to make my own character. In 2013, Disney decided to shut down the servers. But that wasn't the end for Pirates of the Caribbean Online. A dedicated team of volunteers recreated the servers. They took all of the source code from the game and rebuilt it, allowing for players to be able to continue their high seas adventures. And thus, The Legends of Pirates Online was born. I played it a little bit when the game initially came out, but I stepped away as life kind of happened and I lost a little bit of interest. But recently, I wanted to come back and take a look at my first ever MMORPG. Does the game still hold up today? Is it still just as fun and high sea adventures and swashbuckling and all of that good stuff? Well, it was time to find out. Let's dive back into my first MMORPG, The Legends of Pirates Online. Immediately starting off, I finally get into the game, but realize that I'm having a ton of issues. First things first, I tab out a bunch trying to get my graphics settings all figured out and make sure that my audio was all good on OBS, and I realize that I froze my game. So we're just going to go and we're going to immediately restart. Now, while I'm restarting the game, I am going to give a bit of a preference. This game is being held together by volunteers. It is not being made by any major studio or anything like that. So while I am going to be reviewing the game, I'm not going to be wanting to focus too much on any of the issues with the game, especially when it comes to certain things that I don't understand how they work from a developer standpoint. I do want to just focus purely on whether or not this game is fun and some of the things maybe I would like to see the developers look at in the future. But for a game that is being ran by volunteers, I can't honestly say that I really can grade this as harshly as I did Final Fantasy XIV. Trying to get back into the game, I ran into another issue. First of all, you'll see on my screen that the screen is completely frozen. Also, I had a ton of issues with my mouse cursor. For some reason, when my game was running in full screen, the mouse cursor was just not showing up. So I had to spend a good chunk of time just getting through a lot of these technical difficulties, and you'll see on this video that it shows that I can use my mouse cursor, but it turns out that that wasn't actually the case. I couldn't see it on my game screen. Now, I don't know if I could see it on my OBS window as I didn't have it up at the time. But it did take me a long period of time to be able to get the game figured out. Eventually, I learned that I had to run the game in windowed mode, and I couldn't run it at 1920 by 1080. Instead, I had to run it at 1680 by 1050 in order to be able to see my screen and have kind of the best visuals that I could look for. After we got all of that figured out, it took me about 4 minutes. We finally are able to jump into the game and create a pirate. Immediately, I'm hit with all that nostalgia as Jack's beautiful face is staring me down. He picks me up, and we are immediately thrown into the character creator. Now, I didn't want to spend too much time on the character creator because I wanted to focus more on the gameplay. But as I go and I start creating my pirate, I do immediately remember all of the beauty that this game had in the character creator. There are actually a ton of different ways that you can create your character, both male and female, a ton of different face options, and for a game that came out in 2007 and was now being held together mostly by volunteers, I gotta say, I'm pretty much impressed with the different things that were available. But just for the sake of time, I decided to click a bunch of randomizations to be able to get my character figured out. I don't have a ton of time to be able to play the game, so I didn't want to spend a bunch of time focusing on the character creator and getting lost in there for a too long period of time. But I cycle through just to see how many different options there are, mess around with some of the outfits, and eventually I settle on a pirate that I do enjoy. At the very end, you do have the option to be able to either choose one of the preset names that are available, or you can type your own name, but when you type your own name, it has to be approved. I decide to type the name Zojalix and see what will happen. So we type it, and I get immediately told that until the name is approved, I will be given a temporary name, and we are finally then thrust into the game. One of the things that I do absolutely love as Jack Sparrow kicks down the door is a brief little tutorial, as well as just the option of whether or not you want to actually play through the tutorial or not. Some MMOs will just force you into the tutorial, or they will give a tutorial as a big text dump. This game does neither. They actually give you a brief little instance area of play where you can get used to the mechanics, learn how the game works, and give these little pop-ups. And since I hadn't played in a while, I'm pretty sure I could have remembered the tutorial, but I wanted to play through it just in case. One nice feature with this game is there is a nice giant ray of light that tells you where you need to go, as well as this arrow key that's in front of my character. I didn't know if that was something that was like normal or something that maybe was added recently in Legends of Pirates Online. As we get into our next cutscene and we meet Will Turner, I realize that some of these voice actors are pretty similar. Since I was hanging out in a Discord with some friends and they were watching me play, they actually reminded me that this is the same exact voice cast for what you will be seeing in Kingdom Hearts 2. So immediately we know that Disney did a pretty good job at keeping some of those consistent voice actors, even though it's not always easy to do. I gotta say, I'm impressed with that, and the cutscenes do feel nice. The game feels great, and I am hit with all of that joy of that Pirates of the Caribbean nostalgia. So Will Turner gives us a rusty cutlass, and then we have this time where we can learn the skills. Left click to attack, so it's going to be more of an action-based style of combat versus your regular style of MMO. And the fun part with these combos is there are things that it do require a good chunk of timing, so you can't just sit there and spam your click button. If you mistime your sword attacks, then it will be less effective versus if you time them properly. So the game actually doesn't reward you for being a button masher. Unfortunately, as we're going into our next cutscene, we are then told that the Brethren Court has rejected my name. So now my name changes from Buccaneer to Pirate. Not exactly sure what's wrong with the name Zojolix, but I decided to just let it sit, and we will just go from there. So I dispatched some of these undead gravediggers that are not wanting me to escape from this island, and then we head out to our next cutscene. I practice a little bit of the combos where we then meet Bo Beck. Bo Beck is a friend of Jack Sparrow's, and before we talk to him, I do take a little bit of time to see if I can change any of my key bindings, and it turns out you can't. There's actually no ways to change key bindings in the game so far, and this is a pretty big hiccup for me. I don't necessarily want to say that it was a quit moment, but if this were not a MMORPG that was being held together by volunteers, then I definitely would have had a major problem with this. But for this, it doesn't really matter either way. So we talk to Bo Beck where he tells us that he is risking his neck to rescue Jack Sparrow, despite the fact that he was originally hired by Jolly Roger, the main antagonist of the game, in which we are introduced to him in this cutscene. But before we get to the cutscene, we do have to take a little bit of time for the game to teach us how to fire a cannon. Which, honestly, I do remember this being a ton of fun. You use the left mouse button to shoot, and you shoot each ship with each cannon. But, unfortunately, we won't really be using this too much. Once we see Jolly Roger, he turns Bo Beck into a skeleton and then sends us swimming back to Port Royal. So we are introduced to the main antagonist of the game, and now things get a little scary. Because obviously, he's a big bad guy, and we don't really want to deal with him too much. Once we arrive in Port Royal, we then have to go and try and figure out where Jack Sparrow has gone. I decide to run into another player, take a look at him, and see that level 50 is the max level in the game. As we start going, we do see that we have our main quest, defeat 3 undead gravediggers on Port Royal. The nice part is I can take a little bit of time to grind my individual skills. The way that this game works is you do have your overall notoriety level that determines your health and voodoo or your mana. But rather than having your individual classes, you have individual skills that you can level up. Those are sword, gun, sailing, cannon, voodoo doll, voodoo staff, dagger, and grenade. There are a ton of different skills that you can level up, and those are just your combat skills that I mentioned there. There are also some out-of-combat skills, such as gambling and fishing, as well as potion brewing, but we'll get into those in a little bit. As you are defeating enemies, you also get some loot pouches that can drop, and since it is spooky season, we get some of those haunted pouches. This is where we kind of start to encounter our first kind of really weird bug. I decide to spend some time to level up my sword so that way it can be a little bit more effective. As I'm doing this though, I encounter some weird aggro moments with the individual enemies. Some of them decide that they don't want to aggro me until I actually start fighting them. Others don't really want me to aggro unless I am halfway across the area. Then they aggro onto me, no biggie cheese. As we're fighting, we pick up the Deckhand's Cutlass, which I can't pick up until I am sword level 4. So in order to get better gear, the game encourages you to continue to grind out your individual skills. I get a level 2 notoriety, continue to fight, dealing with some of these really, really weird aggroed skills with these undead gravediggers before eventually I go through that ray of light to go and talk to Tia Dalma. Once I go and talk to Tia Dalma, she hands me the compass, which then introduces me to the minimap. And then from there, we continue on to go and look for Jack Sparrow. We have to recover a release order from a Navy cadet on Port Royal, so we're going to be definitely taking the time to do that, because I wanted to focus primarily on the main quest line. I grab a quick another sword skill. I get really confused because I'm getting attacked from somewhere, have no idea where. Eventually, I do find the undead gravedigger that is aggroed onto me, and I take him out before I head out to go and fight the Navy cadet. I do take some time to look over some of the gear that I had dropped, and I kind of like that you're not just constantly getting gear drops for items that you could get. It gives you something to look forward to. When you pick up a sword that you look at and is really shiny, has a lot of really cool abilities, but you can't use it yet, it then just gives you something to work towards. I equip my Deckhand's Cutlass once I get sword level 4, which also gives me the ability to heal. And as some weapons do have their own individual skills that come with those weapons. It is really nice, and I do very much appreciate having that because it also then just makes me not as ready to just jump and go to these shops immediately. Speaking of shops, one of the things I'm going to notice that I am going to point out as I'm heading up to go and talk to Elizabeth Swan is that this game does not have an in-game cash shop. There is also no monthly subscription. When the game was originally owned by Disney, there was an unlimited access monthly subscription that gave you access to every single part of the game. But for the servers of Legends of Pirates Online as it is now, there is no monthly subscription. You get full access to everything that the game has to offer without having to spend any money. And that is really nice, especially for when you're playing a game that is mostly focused around its nostalgia and not really something that is being made for profit. Huge credit to the developers on that one there. After we take out a few Navy cadets for a little bit of extra experience, we go and we talk to Elizabeth Swan, where we hand her the release orders as well as she then sends us off to go and find Jack Sparrow in none other than Tortuga. As we get ready to head to Tortuga, we have to first go and get a ship. And we head down to our good old buddy, Darby Drydock. But before we do that, I decide to go check out some of the item shops and the vendors just to kind of see what we could be looking at, as well as just clean up my inventory a little bit. I realize that you can sell up to 6 items at a time to clear out your inventory and get some gold for it. You can also just trash items in your inventory, but it's not something I didn't really want to spend a ton of time doing. So any items that I couldn't use, I decided to just sell and get rid of so that way I didn't have to worry about them. And then we are able to move forward and continue on. We loop around into the city before we go and we see Darby Drydock, where he is the one who will be giving us a ship. But before we do that, I do spot these curious little tables here off to the side. These are for your repairing ship minigame. I do remember this being a pretty quick and efficient way to earn some gold, so I decided to give it a shot. I start off with the easy, where you have a series of minigames. The faster you complete these minigames, the more money you earn, as well as the faster you complete the whole challenge. There are 3 different difficulties: easy, normal, and hard. Obviously, the harder it is, the harder it is, but also the more money you earn. So even if you don't necessarily do things quickly on the hard side, but you can still earn some good money. I spend a little bit of time with easy, where I really, really struggle at sawing for some reason. I think it's just because my hands shake all the time, but that's just a body thing and not really much that I can deal with. Then I pound some nails into a board as well as clean up some leaks, and then we give it a shot on the harder difficulty. The easier difficulty obviously is easier, but the harder difficulty does overall give us some more money. So even though you do have the option to do the harder difficulty, it just seems to make a little bit more sense to spend time doing the harder difficulty to make more money versus doing the easier difficulty. Even though you can do it faster, the money payoff just isn't really worth it. Once we finish doing some more ship repairing, we then finally go and talk to Darby Drydock, and we purchase our light sloop, which is the first ship that we can get. We don't have the choice to make our own name, so I just hit random, get the name Ghostly of Doom, and decide that my sloop will be forever named Ghostly of Doom. Then I decided to just take a look and see. It looks like Darby Dry Dock does have some quests if we want to do them later, but I also wanted to see what options we had for ships. Looks like we can purchase a light sloop, galleon, frigate, and brig, and we get options to the medium class of ship at level 5, and then at level 15 we get the war, which is the highest class of ship. I don't play all the way to level 15 because there is just a lot that I had to look at, and I didn't really have the time to be able to get that far. So we take more final looks through Darby Dry Dock's menus, and then we go into our dinghy and launch our ship, and this is where we are then introduced to sailing. Once we sail, you pop onto the helm and you can sail your ship. In the bottom left or top left corner, underneath your very own name, you have a bunch of different bars. You have your hull health, which is your overall health, your speed, and then you have these 3 different small health bars in this weird little circle. That shows you the integrity of each side. Depending on how much damage a side of your ship is taken will determine how fast your overall hull health will go down. So it is actually important that if your hull is taking more damage on one side, that you try and move around so that way you can take less damage as you continue to engage in naval combat. That doesn't really become relevant for us, but I'll get to that too much later on when we do more sailing. We sail to Devil's Anvil, where we then talk to Captain Barbossa, and he tells us all about how dark a place is, and then gives us a pistol and introduces us to the code. The code is just a way that the game tells us to stick in ways that would be a little bit more realistic. So we are unable to shoot any of the human people within the game. We can only use our sword or voodoo weapons, because shooting somebody that is a human would make it be a lot less realistic, because if somebody takes one of those bullets, yeah, I'm sorry, they're not going to be standing up very easily. So we take a little bit of time to level up our shooting, and then we move on to go to Tortuga, obviously everybody's favorite island. It's a little bit of a sailing journey, and I decided to take some time to take out a Navy ferret. This is then where I'm introduced to the notoriety system, as well as we take some time to do some sailing combat. What better way to take out these ships than to circle around them and fire off our broadsides? We fire off the broadsides, 1 being left broadside, 2 being right broadside, circling the ship so that way we can keep ourselves outside of their cannon range. I'm terrible at it, so there's going to be multiple moments where it doesn't work out well for me. But we take out this Navy ferret just to get a feeling for the ship combat, as well as get introduced to the notoriety system. Once you take out a ship or fire on a ship that is not a skeleton ship, you will then see that we have a pirate flag by our health. That just tells everybody that is not a ghost ship that we are a pirate ship, and then they will begin to shoot us on sight. Once I take out the Navy ferret, I then land in Tortuga, where I pick up the loot. Once you take down a ship, you are then given some loot where you get it exchanged for gold. That is one of the things that I very much remember as a kid being the big area of fun for me. I would remember getting together with a group of friends from church. We would log on and we would hop onto the biggest ship that we could, and we would just sail around and try and get as much loot as possible. My cannon skill became my best one because we had a friend who is much better at sailing than the rest of us. Once we land on Tortuga, we make our way to the Faithful Bride in Tortuga, a tavern where Jack tells us that we're going to be going after the Pearl and that we have to get a crew. But before we get a crew, we have to earn the trust of a young Joshua Gibbs. Not really young, but I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt there. So this is where the gameplay loop begins to really kind of take its toll. We then have to go around the various areas of the game and immediately start taking out people here, taking out people there, and just trying to get all of these quests done, which is basically just go here, take this person out, and go here and sink these different types of ships. So we do that relatively quickly. We head over to the Wild Woods to take out the Navy Cadets first, and once we take out the Navy Cadets, as well as grind more skills on some Scorpions and some Undead Bandits, then we finally go and we purchase a galleon ship, which is going to be one that is a lot better suited for combat, but not as fast. So we hop onto our galleon ship, the Riptide Pillager, and we immediately decide, hey, let's see if we can take out a ship that is much, much too strong for us. So we find a Navy Vanguard, and we begin our circling prowess. Thankfully, the AI on the ships aren't the smartest, so it does allow us to circle well enough that we can take it out, despite my poor circling skills. And it works out nice because it gives a good chunk of sailing experience as well as just kind of gives me a better taste for that ship combat. I definitely can see how this game is not very well suited for those solo players out there, unfortunately, because as a solo player, it is very probably monotonous is the best word to use, that when sailing around, you are going to be spending a ton of time just firing off your broadsides, not really having people that you can talk to, and just overall your plundering and things like that would be relatively slow. However, if you could get a solid group of scallywags together and fill up one of these ships, I can imagine that sailing around and having a ton of fun plundering would be a great time. I take out the Navy Vanguard, get a level in sailing, which gives me access to full sail, a ability that speeds up my sailing. So since I can do that, it makes it a lot easier for me to be able to progress through the Caribbean and go quickly, even though I have a ship that is not very well dedicated for speed. We sail on to go and find our prey, another Navy ferret ship. And I figure this fight's going to be relatively easy since we have a battle-ready ship. But as I approach, I notice that the Navy ferret is surrounded by 2 East India Trading Company Sea Vipers. 2 other light sloops, which relatively should not be an issue either. So I just figure the more that I circle, the better things will be. But as the fight goes on, I realize that these ships are now clipped into each other, and things start getting a little scary. Because there are now 4 ships clipped into each other, and since I have the pirate notoriety, any nearby ships that see this fight will want to join in and try and stop us. So at this point, things turn into a bit of a cluster, and I start to kind of panic a little bit. More and more ships continue to join, and I decide that my best option is just to try and focus as much as possible to fight the Navy Ferret instead of East India Trading Company Vipers or the multiple other ships that had came into the fight. As I continue to fight, things get really scary, especially as I realize that the broadsides will lock on to whatever ship is closest. So even though the ferret was my target, the 2 centurions that were making bread to a Navy ship sandwich were making it very difficult for me to take out my ship. And more ships continue to join the fray, and I thought, oh no, if this continues, we're going down to the bottom. And I do remember that if you get sunk, it is very expensive to repair your ship, so I really start to panic. Thankfully, another ferret is in the fight, and we continue to circle, avoiding as much fire as possible, and eventually we do manage to take down our ferret. And at that moment, as I'm currently surrounded by multiple ships, many that are very much past the level of which I want to be fighting, I decide to get the heck out of Dodge. I activate full sail and immediately turn to head towards Tortuga. My ship has taken a ton of damage, and I really don't want to fight any more than I have to without risking any more damage to my poor ship. Thankfully, we do manage to escape and make our way back to Tortuga. As we make our way back to Tortuga, we head over to Gibbs, and he decides that, well, he wants to work with us. We get 200 notoriety rep, and then he tells us to recruit a guy named James Pidgley. We talk to the bartender Carver, who is supposedly a person in good contact with him. And so we need to go and get a very specific tattoo in order to show that we are not working with the East India Trading Company, and the only person who does that tattoo is Tattoo Bonita. So we head over to Tattoo Bonita in her parlor shop, have a little bit of trouble trying to actually trigger that dialogue instead of talking to Slim instead. And so once we talk to Tattoo Bonita, she tells us that we need some very specific ingredients in order to make this tattoo work. We have to go and defeat undead bandits as well as some scorpions in the wild woods. So we take some time leveling up our shooting, as that I remember being a much stronger skill than our sword overall, so we decide to just focus on that. After taking a bunch of time to take out our various enemies and foes, we get all the ingredients that we need, and then I decide to fight an area boss as I see the giant scorpion Malicioso. I open up and decide to shoot it with a venom shot so that way it has a little bit of poison damage over time, and then I switch to my sword because I remembered that my sword had a healing ability. And since he was considered a red enemy, I figured this was going to be a very difficult fight. And it was pretty difficult, but I do manage to solo it relatively easily. So, after I finish fighting and grind a few more skills, I head back over to Tattoo Bonita. And this is what I was talking about with that gameplay loop. For a long time, we spend a bunch of time just going to this place and beating these people, and then going to this other place and beating these other people. I take a quick break because I wanted to check out the potion brewing. And when we take a look at the potion brewing, it turns out to be just a pretty simple skill minigame, kind of similar to Tetris. You just drop the ingredients on your board, match 3 in a row, and once you match a set, it then creates more of what you're looking for. And for the Marksman Drought 1, we needed 2 poison extracts and 1 crab extract. So we grind the potions and we get those that we need, and that levels up our potions to level 2. Once I finish that up, that's where life kicks in and it's time to call it quits for right now. About a day later, we log back into the game. We decide that we have to rename our pirate, and we just go and take the pirate, just a random name, and we turn from pirate to Raven Wheel Arrow. Also, the game didn't save my graphics settings, so we do have a little bit of trouble with that, but again, we get that figured out and we can jump back into the game pretty quickly. We get back onto Riptide Pillager, our light galleon, as we have to go and take out Navy Bulwark ships to continue to work for Carver. And this is just a lot more of the same from the gameplay loop. Go sink these ships, go and take out these people, go talk to this person. We do take a little bit of time to try and repair our ship, but since our notoriety was pretty high, we actually get pursued by other ships and are forced to turn tail and run relatively quickly. This is again where I think with the current state of the game, this game is very much not favored for what would be your normal solo play, as I had mentioned earlier. It's going to be really easy to have a party of people together, so that way while one person is sailing, other people can be focusing on repairing the ship and keeping everything in tip-top shape, so that way you can continue to plunder to your heart's content. As we continue to fight these Navy Bulwark ships, we end up with more issues of people coming in and out, and this is where I actually learn a pretty fun way to cheese things. Once I take out the Navy Bulwark ships, I teleport back to Tortuga through my map, which is something that I didn't even realize I could do, but I did it anyway. And then I realize I'm back on the coast. What would happen if I were to launch my ship? Would my notoriety be gone, or would it stay? I launch my ship again. I don't launch my ship right at the coast of Tortuga. It puts me right back to where I was, which is kind of a fun little thing, but it does remove my notoriety. So I can save myself the cost of repairing my ship and just repair it through the various minigames. That saves me money, but doesn't necessarily save me time. Either way, I go ahead and I grab it, finish repairing my ship, so that way it's back up in tip-top shape, and then I sail to Tortuga so that way I get my loot. I realize that the game does kind of account for your cheesing, and if you do teleport back, you don't get the loot from your ship. So you would need to go and make sure that you actively dock your ship. It does cause a little bit of inconvenience, but I do actually really like that because realistically, if you're just going to teleport off your ship, you're not going to get the loot from it. So we decide to sail back to Tortuga so that way we can get our loot. We go back and talk to Carver, where we then learn that he is James Pidgley, and we know that we once again have to go and take out another ship. So we decide to earn some money real quick so that way I can get the light brig, in which we get our light brig, the Drunk Flower. A fun little ship that, again, not really sure where that name came from, but it was a preset name and I thought it was funny, so we stick with it. We go and we fight one more Sea Viper, and then we have to maroon Captain Steadman on a wild island. Thankfully, after we sink his ship and we get Captain Steadman, Devil's Anvil is not too far away, so we can just land at Devil's Anvil for him to be marooned. And then we start abusing the teleport system for the sake of convenience. We teleport back to Tortuga, and then we have to go and recover a list from a desk in a trading company office. Something that Carver could very much have easily done, as it's right next to the Faithful Bride, but whatever. We have to do quests, so it's fine. We take out this Navy guard just so that way we don't have to deal with him, grab that list, and then return to Carver. And then we have to go and do more sailing. In this moment, as I'm sailing, I'm starting to really feel the gameplay loop starting to drag on as I am playing this solo. I try to do everything that I can to make it a little bit more interesting, but as time went on, the game continued to wear and tear. Unfortunately, also, as we take down these Navy bulwarks, we get caught into a sea of crazy enemies. We try to fight our way through, trying to power through for the quest, but the odds become just a little bit too overwhelming, and we are eventually sent down into the bottom and sunk. Once we respawn in jail where we have to kick the door down, and from when you get sunk, you don't actually really suffer any penalty. This was the only time that I died, so there might be more penalties for repeated deaths, but I didn't experience this for the one time that I did die. However, I couldn't afford to repair my ship, so we sail out with Riptide Pillager, the galleon, to try and finish out our quest. We do eventually finish it out, and it does become a little bit difficult, but we do finally get our way through, and we get back. I go quickly, and I actually decide to switch servers because I was realizing I wasn't encountering many players, but there were a little over 500 people online, which I was actually kind of impressed to see. So we switched to the most populated server, Abasa Ocean, and then we head back over to Carver to continue on with our quest. I really just wanted to see other players around, as it does fill me with a ton of joy to see other players around in the game. Now, we once again are sent into the depths of the Thieves' Den in order to grab something specific and defeat 8 Navy guards in the Thieves' Den. We grind some more skills before heading out, and this is again where I remember that, as far as I can tell, there is 0 instance content in this game. Every single aspect of this game is considered overworld. You can access any cave, forest, no matter what level you are, which for some people would be great, other people might be terrible. It didn't really matter to me for this brief period of time that I was playing. I can see, however, that if this game were to be a little bit more populated, that this could very much become an issue. So we rush through the Thieves' Den, we get everything that we need, and we then once again head back to Carver. Once I look at my level and I realize what I have the ability to do, I then decide to take a break and play some poker. And I learned that there's actually a gambling skill in this game. I didn't remember that being a thing when I previously played, but it's kind of cool to see it now. Because as part of the game, you can actually pick up playing cards as loot, and you can use those playing cards to actually cheat your way into a poker game to win. So I decided to cheat. I end up actually winning this poker game, which the more you level up your gambling skill, the easier it becomes to cheat. So I play a little bit more poker, get my gambling skill up just a little bit, but not too much, and then we decide to actually move on. I know, I got you all set up thinking that maybe there would be something really, really cool coming from realizing what level we are. But I do actually remember what I can get at this point. I repair my ship and we set sail again to head over to Cuba. But instead of setting sail, we talk to the dock worker to stow away. For a low price of 50 gold, we can stow away to any major island. So we stow away to Cuba to get what I remember being the strongest early game item you can get, the voodoo doll. And what better way to get the voodoo doll than to do a ton of go here and take out these enemies. And so we set out again. We go here, we do the thing, and finally, after another quick break and some time with my baby, I do get the voodoo doll. The voodoo doll I remember being my favorite weapon as a kid because it has a wonderful ability. You can attune to a target and then you can run around and use the various spells to do damage. And as long as an enemy is a melee enemy, you can pretty much kill it without having any issue, just don't stop moving. So, I train up my voodoo skill, getting my doll to level 4 before continuing on. I try to do everything that I can to reduce that gameplay loop, but no matter how hard I try, I very much continue to burn out from just the long slog of gameplay. Again, I don't necessarily think that the game is bad. I really didn't say that I wasn't enjoying it, but the main story just didn't really have a ton to keep me invested, because in order to get one singular crew member, you had to do like 5 different quests, so it just kind of felt like that the story was really grinding to a halt. After a bunch of time utilizing our voodoo doll and doing everything that we can to get Carver, we finally do recruit Pidgely, and we do take a quick stop for the cannon defense game, but I'm not even going to get into that because that was a disaster, and that's not really something that I would spend a ton of time doing no matter what, because the aiming was weird and it was feeling clunky and not a fun time. Anyways, we recruit Pidgely, and at this point, I've pretty much just decided that there's not really much more for me to do. I do remember having a good time with the fishing, and I decided to go and check that out one more time, just so that way I can remember if that was as fun as it was. And I gotta say, it was. There was a lot of fish that I was able to catch, and I can definitely remember the feelings of progression as I was leveling up my fishing. So that was fun, and if I had more motivation, that would probably be something I would spend a lot more time doing. Overall, Legends of Pirates Online, if you played this game as a kid, you probably will remember a ton of fun things that you did, and you probably will continue to enjoy a lot of that time. The biggest area with this game, though, is the story just grinds to a halt the moment you get past the main tutorial. And that's not something that, again, that I can really give a gripe on the current developers, because they just picked the game up from where it was, kept the main story, kept everything as beautiful and as pure as they could from its nostalgic game back in 2007. I do want to give huge props, though, because they have continued to add more things into the game, more various events like the East India Trading Company treasure fleets, as well as they even created a whole new expansion based solely on the Kraken. And there's a ton of in-game events that come through, so even if you're a high-level player, you'll still find more areas where you can have fun and things to do in the game. Overall, I will definitely say that I very much enjoyed my time. And I'm not going to score this game like I did with Final Fantasy XIV, because I just don't think that that's fair to score a team of volunteers that are keeping just a passion project alive. If this was a game that was being used primarily for money and things like that, then yes, I definitely would be more inclined to give it a full score. But if you played this game as a kid, I would definitely recommend getting a group of friends together, crewing up together, and sailing once again back out on the high seas. Because after all, yo ho, a pirate's life for me. As always, I do want to give a huge shout out to my Ko-Fi monthly supporters, because without them, this channel wouldn't be possible. And if you would like to support monthly, you can do so down in the description below. That would be the best way if you want to support financially. I know some people have supported through Twitch subs in the past, but Ko-Fi supporting is the best way to do it now, because most of the money will go directly to me and not go through some other party like Twitch or YouTube. And right now, streaming is a little bit more difficult to do for long periods of time, so expect more YouTube content like this in the future. If you guys have any recommendations for any MMOs that you would like for me to review in the future, please do let me know down in the comments below. I want to try and get at least one MMO review out a month. I don't know how easily that will happen, but we're going to do everything that we can to make it happen. It will either happen either once a month or once every other month. We'll see. Don't hold me on that. I'll keep everything updated in Discord, so make sure you guys also join the Discord, link in the description below. Thank you guys again for watching, and as always, you are loved, you are valued, you are fearfully and wonderfully made, and I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day.